Make sure your eggs are cooked, right? So all that stuff. That's how this can spread. But what happens with Salmonella? So this is the problem with Salmonella, is that here we see it invading the epithelial cells in the intestine. Okay? What can happen is that it can break through and actually get into the bloodstream. If it gets in the bloodstream, where does it go? Everywhere. Everywhere, yeah. So this can also lead to sepsis. Okay? All right, so that's another issue with this. In fact, people have died from Salmonella because of sepsis. All right, so whenever E. coli, Salmonella, those are the popular ones. There's another one. This is Shigella. Okay. This is, sometimes you hear about this. Restaurants can be reservoirs, or can be places where Shigella outbreaks happen. So sometimes you hear about these different, periodically, like in the Bay Area, some of the restaurants there. Shigellosis. So now, again, since these are gastrointestinal diseases, you see some similar symptoms. In fact, that's what makes it kind of difficult to analyze these diseases, because they all look kind of similar when someone comes in with these symptoms. Okay? So you have fever, you have abdominal cramps, diarrhea, getting bloody stool. The fact that it's a fever tells you that there's an infection involved. Okay? This one also produces a toxin. Right? So you have two things going on here as well. Right? Or some of them produce toxin, I should say. So this one has a limited reservoir. So humans and primates are the cause. So the reason why I mentioned restaurants is that the way that it gets noticed is that the people who work in a restaurant, or someone who works in a restaurant who's contaminated or who's infected, will handle the food, and all the patrons of that restaurant will now get Shigella. So that's how they catch notice of public health officials. What happens in this case, the bacteria, they invade the epithelial cells in the large intestine. That's what causes the bloody stool, because they end up killing those cells. And some of them can cause more severe problems because they produce a toxin which will actually stop the protein synthesis in the intestinal cells. Right? So if you stop the protein synthesis, what happens to the cells? Yeah, they die, right? Okay. And whatever, so in the case of human transmission, whatever they handle can get contaminated. You can find it in the food, water, fomites. Okay? All right, so it goes from human to these non-living reservoirs, then back to humans again. So with Shigella, what happens is that here we have the bacteria. They also infect epithelial cells, this time in the colon or large intestine. Then they'll start to invade other cells. Right? Eventually, they'll kill those cells. Right? They do get in the bloodstream, but typically our host defenses get rid of those bacteria. Right? Any questions about this? Just as an aside, one of the issues with Shigella is that what makes it a little bit of a challenge to figure out is that there's E. coli 01, so EHAC, E. coli 0157H7 has very similar symptoms to Shigella. Okay. And so they actually have to do other tests to try to figure out which bacteria it is. Right? And some of those tests can involve things that we've done with our bacterial ID. Okay, this one we don't see too many cases in the United States, but it is problem worldwide. And whenever there's any natural disaster like flooding, right, for example Sandy, right, there's always concern about cholera, even in the United States. Does anyone know why? Why would natural disasters be related to like this disease? Yeah, so if we see a breakdown in our infrastructure, like our sanitation system, right? then it can become easier for cholera to spread. So when they had the, like in Haiti, right, that was a big issue, okay, right, because it disrupted their sanitation system, and they didn't have enough infrastructure to rebuild it, So what happens in this particular disease? Now remember, we started the unit talking about cholera. Okay, that was with John Snow in London with the water pump. Okay, with Ross pump. Right? That was cholera. And so a common way to spread cholera is through fecally contaminated water. Okay? So once they infect an individual, that individual will produce a lot of cholera. So when you look at their diarrhea, their feces, right? Each mill can have more than 1 million cells, okay? And an individual can shed off 1 liter per hour, right? Because of the massive fluid loss. And the reason why there's such a big fluid loss is that there's a toxin that the cholera produces, which interferes with the electrolyte balance, and that causes just the water to be shed out of the digestive system. So the cells just start losing their water, and that can be fatal. So the way that you treat cholera, actually one effective way, and this is what's often done in developing countries, is because there's so much water loss, electrolyte loss, one very effective way to do this is simply by replacing the lost salts in water. So if you keep a person hydrated, you give them electrolytes, that actually reduces the mortality rate. Okay? That's why even here, right, if someone has severe diarrhea, right, one treatment might be just Pedialyte, okay, and that's again to simply replace the salts in water that's been lost. And there's also antibiotics that can reduce that can fight off the bacteria. If you kill the bacteria, then you'll reduce the toxin production. All right. Any questions about this? Something else that's associated with this infection, because there's so much diarrhea, there's so much water loss. What happens is that the cells actually die and then they get shed off, and so the stool actually becomes more like rice. They call it rice water stool because it looks like when you wash rice and you dump out the water. Okay, it has that kind of appearance because of all the cells that are discharged, that are killed or discharged into the diarrhea. Nice, pleasant thought. Okay. Here's another one. This is another type of bacteria which we actually hear about here in the United States. It's Listeria, and it causes listeriosis. The bacteria is called Listeria monocytogenes. The reason why we're concerned about this particular bacteria is that it can go beyond the digestive system. It can cause, so besides gastroenteritis, it can cause flu-like symptoms, sepsis, it can cause encephalitis, meningitis, and then most notably, it can cause spontaneous abortions. Okay, so if a woman is pregnant and gets infected with Listeria, this could have some serious problems. Also, the bacteria is salt tolerant, right? So it can survive in environments that have a high amount of salt. Okay. Also, it's psychrophilic. Right? So psychrophilic means what?
Extremely cold.
Yeah, cold. Right. So it likes cold. Okay. So right around the house, where would you find this bacteria? Yeah, refrigerator. Right. So it's known to be a problem in refrigerators with food. This especially salty foods, so like your deli meats. Okay. You can also find this on fruit. Right. And again, just to top that off, it all, besides being cold tolerant, salt tolerant, it also is microaerophilic, which means what? Low.
Producing low oxygen.
Yeah, low oxygen, right? So low oxygen. So even with deli wrapped meats, with plastic wrapped deli meats, it can still survive and grow. Okay. Right. So the way that you control this is, so with a lot of the foods, you have to make sure that it's properly cooked or pasteurized before you consume it. That's,
What are those little packets in deli wrap meats and other fresh meats that are supposed to keep things fresh?
that I don't know. I'm trying to. I don't. Is it the padding or?
Well, there's padding, and then they always come with like a little square packet. Seems like it's granule inside.
Yeah, I have to think. It might be
I
for.
think
It might be.
you serve the water. They don't control the bacteria. It's just for the water,
Yes,
for the liquid
drying
stuff,
the
for
water
drying
out.
out.
Yeah, oh.
Yeah, that's for that.
So like a desiccant. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Okay, so here is. Here's another one that we hear about. So again, I'm going over the ones that we tend to hear about. This is Helicobacter pylori. This is what causes ulcers. And what happens in an ulcer is that you either erode the stomach lining or the duodenum of the small intestine. And the form that we're going to talk about is caused by a bacteria. Right? So it turns out that most of the ulcers, about 80% of the ulcers, are caused by this particular bacteria, which is H. pylori. Now what's surprising is that a lot of us actually already have this bacteria in our system. Okay? So it's actually part of our microbial community. But only a few of us actually get infected and develop ulcers. Right, so the number is about 30% of the U.S. population is infected with H. pylori. So about a third of us right now have H. pylori hanging around in our bodies. However, only 1 in 6 of those who are infected will develop ulcers. Here's what the bacteria looks like. And you may notice it has these structures here, which are what? Flagella. Those are flagella. That's what allows it to move, and we're going to see how that's important. Okay? The way this is spread is by a fecal-oral route of transmission. So this should look familiar because when we're talking about digestive diseases, that's how a lot of these get spread, is by a fecal-oral route. And there's a picture in your book which shows how the spread happens. Here's a Helicobacter pylori, and here's those flagella. So those flagella allow it to move, and where they want to go is to your to the lining of your to the epithelial lining of your stomach.